Who is Satan? Is he the ultimate personification of evil, or has his image been misunderstood, shaped, and redefined over millennia? The Bible, revered as the ultimate source of spiritual truth, holds the key to uncovering the origins of this infamous figure. But what if Satan wasn't always the devil we imagine today? What if his role in Scripture has evolved over time, influenced by cultural shifts and human interpretation? This story begins with a name, a title, and a question. Is Satan just a title, or is he something more? The earliest mentions of Satan in the Bible are far from the fiery adversary we know today. The Hebrew term Satan originally meant adversary or accuser. It wasn't a proper name, but a role, someone who stood in opposition. In the Book of Job, one of the oldest texts in the Bible, Satan is not the ruler of hell, but a member of the divine council. He appears before God, questioning the faithfulness of Job. Far from being an enemy of God, Satan serves as a prosecutor, testing humanity's devotion. This depiction challenges our modern understanding. How could the ultimate embodiment of evil once have been a part of God's heavenly court? But the evolution of Satan doesn't stop there. Over time, his image begins to shift, reflecting the cultural and theological changes of the ancient world. By the time of the New Testament, Satan is no longer just an accuser. He is a tempter, a deceiver, and the prince of this world. What caused this transformation? Could it be that Satan's role in Scripture mirrors humanity's growing fears and struggles with sin and temptation? Or is there a deeper mystery behind his evolution? The transition from a title to a persona raises profound questions. If Satan began as a mere functionary in God's divine plan, how did he become the eternal enemy of mankind? And if his role has changed, what does that say about our understanding of good, evil, and the forces that shape our world? To understand Satan's transformation, we must look at the historical and cultural contexts that shaped these texts. The ancient Israelites, living in a world surrounded by rival religions and empires, faced constant threats. Was the figure of Satan a reflection of their struggles, a symbol of the external and internal adversaries they faced? But this is only the beginning. The story of Satan's evolution takes us through the pages of Scripture, the corridors of ancient history, and the depths of human imagination. As we unravel the threads of his transformation, one question looms large. Have we misunderstood Satan all along? As we dive deeper into the story of Satan, his evolution becomes even more perplexing. In the early pages of the Bible, Satan is a title, not a proper name, a role, not a being. But as we move forward in biblical history, Satan begins to take on a persona. How did a title for adversary or accuser transform into the embodiment of pure evil? The answer lies in the changing cultural, theological, and historical contexts of the ancient world. The Book of Job provides our earliest glimpse into the figure we now call Satan. Here, he is not a rebel cast out of heaven, but a member of God's heavenly council. His role is to question, to test, and to challenge. Satan is the prosecutor, bringing accusations against humanity to test their faith. In Job's story, Satan doesn't act independently. He operates under God's permission, serving a divine purpose. This is a far cry from the horned figure ruling over hell that many imagine today. But something begins to shift as we move through the Old Testament. In the post-exilic period, after the Israelites return from Babylonian captivity, their understanding of good and evil becomes more defined. This is where we see the influence of Zoroastrianism, a dualistic religion the Israelites likely encountered during their exile. Zoroastrianism introduced the concept of a cosmic battle between good and evil, a struggle between a benevolent god, Ahura Mazda, and a malevolent adversary, Angra Mainyu. Could this exposure have influenced the Jewish understanding of Satan, shaping him into a more personal and active enemy? In texts like 1 Chronicles and Zechariah, Satan starts to emerge as a distinct figure. In 1 Chronicles 21:1, Satan provokes David to conduct a census of Israel, an act seen as sinful. This is one of the first instances where Satan acts independently, not as a servant of God, but as a force opposing him. Similarly, in Zechariah 3:1-2, Satan stands to accuse the high priest Joshua, a moment where he directly challenges God's chosen leader. These glimpses show a transformation taking place. Satan is no longer just a functionary, he's becoming a distinct persona. By the time we reach the New Testament, this transformation is complete. Satan is now the tempter, the deceiver who opposes God's plan. In the Gospels, he tempts Jesus in the wilderness, offering him power and glory in exchange for worship. Here, Satan takes on the role of an independent antagonist, a far cry from the heavenly prosecutor of Job. He is the prince of this world, a being actively working against God's purposes. But why this shift? What happened between the Old and New Testaments to turn Satan into the ultimate adversary? The intertestamental period, the roughly 400 years between the Old and New Testaments, offers some clues. During this time, Jewish literature began to expand on the figure of Satan. Texts like the Book of Enoch and other apocryphal writings introduce the idea of fallen angels and a celestial rebellion. These stories describe figures like Azazel and Belial, fallen beings who lead humanity astray. Though not canonical, these texts likely influenced how Jews of the Second Temple period viewed Satan, as a rebel who defied God and corrupted humanity. This period also saw the rise of apocalyptic literature, which depicted a cosmic battle between the forces of good and evil. In these texts, Satan evolves from an accuser to a destroyer, the leader of a rebellion against God. The New Testament inherits this understanding, presenting Satan as the enemy of God's kingdom. But this transformation raises a critical question. Did Satan evolve because humanity needed a villain to explain the chaos of the world? The socio-political context of the time cannot be ignored. The Jewish people lived under constant oppression, first by the Babylonians, then the Persians, Greeks, and finally the Romans. These experiences shaped their worldview, creating a need for a cosmic enemy to embody their suffering and struggles. Could Satan's evolution reflect humanity's desire to understand evil and assign it a face? As the New Testament solidifies Satan as a distinct being, his role becomes central to the story of salvation. But the transformation isn't over yet. As Christianity spreads and evolves, so too does Satan. What happens when this adversary becomes more than just a theological figure, when he turns into the cultural and symbolic icon we know today? By the time the New Testament solidifies Satan as a key figure, his role as the ultimate adversary is fully established. No longer just an accuser or tempter, Satan is now portrayed as the prince of this world, the leader of fallen angels, and the architect of sin and destruction. But how did this transformation happen? The answer lies in the interplay of theology, culture, and the human need to explain the mysteries of suffering and sin. One of the most significant influences on Satan's evolution is the apocalyptic literature of the intertestamental period, particularly the Book of Enoch. In these texts, we see a narrative emerge, the rebellion of heavenly beings who defy God and fall from grace. These fallen angels, led by figures like Azazel and Semyaza, corrupt humanity, teaching forbidden knowledge and introducing sin to the world. While these stories are not part of the canonical Bible, they laid the groundwork for understanding Satan as the leader of this celestial rebellion. The New Testament builds on this foundation, presenting Satan as a personal and cosmic enemy. In the Gospels, Satan tempts Jesus in the wilderness, offering him power in exchange for worship. This moment defines Satan as a manipulator and deceiver, preying on humanity's weaknesses. In John's Gospel, Satan is called the prince of this world, underscoring his dominion over earthly systems and his opposition to God's kingdom. But perhaps most significantly, the New Testament introduces the idea of spiritual warfare, a cosmic struggle between God and Satan that directly involves humanity. The Apostle Paul's writings expand on this theme, portraying Satan as the ruler of a dark spiritual realm. In Ephesians, Paul warns believers to put on the full armor of God to stand against the devil's schemes. In the battle between good and evil, Satan becomes the face of rebellion, sin, and death. As Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, Satan's image began to take on new dimensions. Early Christians living under persecution often viewed their Roman oppressors as instruments of Satan. The devil became a political and cultural symbol, representing tyranny and corruption. This duality, a cosmic enemy and a worldly oppressor, gave Satan a far-reaching significance that transcended theology. In the centuries that followed, as Christianity became the dominant religion of the West, his image continued to evolve. Medieval theologians like Augustine and Aquinas elaborated on Satan's role in the grand narrative of creation and redemption. Augustine's writings on original sin placed Satan at the center of humanity's fall, emphasizing his cunning in the Garden of Eden. Meanwhile, Aquinas framed him as a once glorious angel whose pride led to his downfall. These interpretations reinforced Satan's role as a universal enemy, one whose influence extended into every aspect of human life. During the Middle Ages, as fear of witchcraft and heresy grew, Satan became a scapegoat for societal anxieties. He was depicted as a tempter who lured people into forbidden practices, a deceiver who sowed chaos and division. Artistic depictions of Satan from this period, with horns and grotesque features, cemented his image in popular imagination. But is this portrayal consistent with the Bible's depiction, or is it a product of human fear and creativity? This evolution raises an important question. Did Satan's transformation serve a theological purpose, or was it shaped by humanity's need to personify evil? In a world filled with suffering, injustice, and moral ambiguity, Satan became a way to explain the unexplainable, a convenient figure to blame for personal and collective struggles. As Satan's image grew more complex, so did his role in the human story. From Dante's Inferno to Milton's Paradise Lost, Satan was reimagined as a tragic and rebellious figure. These portrayals, while not biblical, influenced how generations understood the devil, blending theology with myth and culture. But this leads to a crucial question. How much of what we believe about Satan comes from Scripture, and how much comes from human imagination? Have we created Satan in our own image, projecting our fears, struggles, and desires onto this enigmatic figure? And if so, what does that reveal about us? Satan's evolution from a title to a persona, and ultimately to a cultural and theological icon, reveals as much about humanity as it does about the concept itself. But as we reflect on his journey through Scripture, history, and culture, one question remains. Is Satan a symbol of human struggles, or a real spiritual being? This question isn't just academic, it cuts to the heart of how we interpret evil and our place in the cosmic battle between good and bad. As Christianity spread and diversified, so too did interpretations of Satan. For some, he became a metaphor, a symbol of human temptation and moral failure. For others, he remained a very real and active force in the world, a being working tirelessly to oppose God's plans. This duality, Satan as both a personal and universal adversary, continues to shape religious belief and practice today. But how much of what we believe about Satan is rooted in Scripture, and how much has been shaped by human imagination and cultural fears? Modern interpretations of Satan have taken on forms that would be unrecognizable to early Christians or even medieval theologians. From the charming tempter in literature to the horned figure in popular media, Satan has become a malleable symbol, adapting to the needs and fears of each generation. In the 20th century, with the rise of secularism and modern psychology, some began to see Satan as a projection of humanity's inner struggles, our guilt, pride, and moral failures externalized. Others, however, held firmly to the biblical portrayal, warning that to dismiss Satan as a mere metaphor was to underestimate his influence. The 21st century has brought new dimensions to the discussion of Satan's role in human life. The rise of technology, global conflict, and societal division has led many to revisit the concept of evil and its origins. Could Satan, in all his historical and cultural complexity, still be influencing the world today? For those who believe in a literal Satan, these challenges, wars, pandemics, political corruption, are seen as evidence of his continued work. For others, these same events are viewed as the natural consequences of human ambition and greed. But the question remains, is Satan just a convenient scapegoat for humanity's failures, or is he an active participant in the chaos of the modern world? The Bible warns that in the end times, Satan will deceive the nations, leading them astray and opposing God's kingdom. Revelation describes a final battle where Satan will ultimately be defeated and cast into the lake of fire. For believers, this is a promise of hope, the assurance that evil will not have the last word. But for skeptics, it raises another question. If Satan is a real being, how do we recognize his influence in a world where evil often wears the mask of good? Satan's legacy challenges us to confront the complexities of evil. Whether we view him as a real spiritual being or a symbol of humanity's darker instincts, his story forces us to grapple with the nature of morality, free will, and the battle between light and darkness. In many ways, Satan is a mirror, reflecting back our fears, desires, and the struggles we face within ourselves. His story is one of rebellion and consequence, a cautionary tale that resonates across cultures and generations. As we conclude this exploration, it's worth asking, what does Satan's story reveal about us? Have we created him in our own image, or is he a real force shaping the world around us? The answer to this question might not only change how we see him, but also how we understand the very nature of good and evil. The story of Satan is far from over. Whether as a symbol or a reality, his legacy endures, shaping how we think about morality, justice, and redemption. But one thing is certain, Satan's role in humanity's story is a reminder of the choices we face and the paths we take. What we believe about him ultimately says more about who we are than who he is.